It was 11:52 p.m. when the front door clicked open. I hadn't planned on staying up, but something about the quiet of the house felt off that night. The kind of stillness that made it hard to settle. I'd been sitting on the couch for over an hour, just watching some documentary I barely paid attention to, half listening to the furnace kick in and out, wondering when she'd come home. Wondering why I even cared so much when she barely texted since 7. Madeline stepped in like a breeze, pretending not to be a storm. The clatter of her heels against the hardwood, the jingle of her keys, the casual, "Hey babe," like she hadn't just come home 4 hours later than she used to when she still told me where she was going. "Didn't expect you to still be up," she added with a faint laugh, slipping out of her coat. Her tone was light, too light. "Rehearsed." "Couldn't sleep," I said. My eyes scanned her automatically. Habit. She looked beautiful, of course. She always did, even when I wasn't supposed to notice. But then I saw it. The smudge. It sat just below her jawline, trailing toward the collarbone. A dark reddish stain, not quite lipstick, not quite a bruise. Subtle, but not invisible. And certainly not innocent. It looked too precise to be accidental and too unfamiliar to ignore. I stared at it longer than I probably should have. She caught me looking, tilted her head just slightly like she knew exactly what I'd seen. "Oh," she brushed her hand over it casually. "I think someone spilled wine on me. At dinner. Clumsy waiter." She smiled, but her hand lingered too long over the spot. "Dinner went late?" I asked. She nodded, loosening the knot in her scarf. "Yeah. The client from Denver wouldn't stop talking. You know how those meetings get." She set her bag down by the table, then made a beeline for the kitchen. "Want anything?" "I'm starving." That was new. She never ate after 9. "No, I'm good," I said, following her a step behind, trying to make sense of what I was feeling. The knot in my stomach wasn't unfamiliar, but it was the first time it didn't untie with her voice. From the kitchen, I watched her pull a wine glass out of the cupboard, but then noticed the one already sitting on the coffee table in the living room. Half full. Lipstick on the rim. I walked toward it, slow, quiet. It wasn't hers. Not the glass, we owned the glass. But the shade on the rim? Bright coral, like something off a spring magazine ad. Not her usual dusty rose, and not something she'd wear to a work dinner. She came back into the room with a bowl of cereal. "I know, not exactly gourmet," she said, laughing softly. "But it's been that kind of night." I pointed at the wine glass. "You already had some?" She blinked, followed my gaze, and for a split second her mouth opened, but no words came. Then, just as quick, "Oh yeah. I poured that earlier. Before I left. Didn't finish it. But you said you went straight to dinner." "I did," she said too quickly, then added, "I meant before I got dressed. Just had a few sips while getting ready." I nodded. "What were you drinking?" "Merlot." I looked into the glass. It wasn't Merlot. I didn't call her on it. Not yet. Instead, I walked to the bathroom. I don't even know why. Maybe just to get away from her voice for a second. That's when I saw the towel. It was draped over the side of the hamper. Not ours, white, plush, branded with a gold-stitched logo from the Grand Elysian, a boutique hotel downtown. We'd stayed there once 2 anniversaries ago. It wasn't part of our laundry. I picked it up, held it like it might tell me something. She appeared in the doorway behind me, bowl still in her hand. "Oh, right," she said with a shrug. "That's from the gym. They use Grand Elysian linens. Fancy, right? I thought you stopped going there months ago." She froze. Just for a second. "I did. But Monica gave me a guest pass. Went on Wednesday, I think." "Wednesday was when your car was in the shop," I said evenly. She blinked. "Right? Thursday." "I meant Thursday." I set the towel back down. "You should return it." "Yeah," she muttered, then turned back down the hallway. "I'll put it in my bag." I stared at the towel for another minute. There was a faint smudge on it too, makeup maybe. Or something else. I didn't accuse her. I didn't raise my voice or demand explanations. I just stood there in that dim light, feeling something slip. Not everything, not yet. But something small and significant, like a loose thread in a well-worn shirt. When I came back to the living room, she was curled up on the couch with a blanket around her legs, scrolling through her phone like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You coming to bed?" she asked. "In a bit." She didn't press me. Just nodded, then kept tapping away at her phone. I sat back down on the opposite end of the couch and glanced over. She tilted the screen ever so slightly away. That's when it hit me, not the towel, not the smudge, not even the glass. But the smell. Her coat, which she had hung on the back of the chair, carried a scent I didn't recognize. Sharp, floral, expensive. Not her perfume. Not mine. Not anyone's I could name. It clung to the fabric like it belonged to someone else entirely. I got up and walked past her, heading to the bedroom. My hands were cold. My chest felt tight, not angry, not heartbroken, just alert. Like something deep inside me had snapped awake and was quietly taking notes. Everything that night, the smudge, the wine, the towel, the scent, the vague excuses, all of it etched itself into my memory with eerie clarity. Like my brain had decided on its own to record it in high definition. I lay in bed for a long time, staring at the ceiling while she finished her cereal and scrolled through her life. When she finally slipped in beside me, she whispered goodnight and kissed my shoulder like she always did. But her kiss felt colder now. And I knew, without knowing how or why or even what exactly, I knew this was the beginning of something else. Something I wasn't ready for but couldn't unsee. I woke up the next morning to the sound of her humming in the kitchen. It was light, aimless, the kind of tune people hum when they want to sound relaxed. But it didn't match anything about how I felt or how she should have felt after the weirdness of last night. If she remembered the tension at all, she was burying it deep. I stayed in bed longer than usual, eyes on the ceiling, my mind retracing every step. That towel? That wine glass? The perfume that didn't belong? The mark on her neck? Not one of those things alone would have meant anything. But together, they painted a picture I hadn't wanted to see. One that had probably started forming long before I'd noticed it. When I finally walked into the kitchen, she greeted me with a smile like nothing had happened. "Hey, I made you a coffee," she said, nudging a mug across the counter toward me. "Thanks," I murmured, lifting it slowly. "No sugar. No milk. Just black." She used to remember how I liked it. Or maybe she still did, and this was her new way of pretending we'd always been strangers. "You sleep okay?" she asked. "Yeah. You?" She nodded too quickly. "Out like a light." I said nothing. Just sipped quietly and watched her out of the corner of my eye as she moved around the kitchen. She looked rehearsed. Like someone playing herself in a documentary. All the right lines, all the right moves, but the timing was just off. That tiny lag between thought and response, the kind that gives away a lie, not with words but with rhythm. Later, while she took a shower, I sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop. I didn't even open it right away. I just stared at the screen, thoughts racing faster than I could organize them. Every small change from the past few months came rushing back, like someone hit rewind on moments I hadn't realized were connected. She'd started setting her alarm earlier, by at least 30 minutes, but never left the house any earlier. I'd hear it buzz at 6 a.m., and by 6:30, she'd still be in the bathroom, brushing her hair like she had nowhere to be. No calls, no video meetings scheduled that early. Just her, pacing between the mirror and the sink like she was waiting on something. She also stopped drinking coffee with me. It had been our thing for years, every morning, 2 cups, same table. Then, about 2 months ago, she started saying she wasn't in the mood or had already had hers while I slept. But the pot never smelled brewed when I got up. Her phone had changed too. She used to text with her best friend Jamie constantly. Group chats, memes, long rants about coworkers. Yeah? Jamie hadn't shown up on her screen in weeks. In fact, her phone had become a minefield of acronyms and single-letter names. C, DK, RJ, no more actual names in her contact list. When I asked about it once, she claimed she was reorganizing everything for work. Privacy measures, she said. And the calls always taken in another room. She'd answer, walk away, close the door. Her voice would soften to a low murmur behind the drywall like she was saying something holy. Or forbidden. I thought back to 2 weeks ago when I borrowed her car to run an errand. She had left her purse on the passenger seat, and when I reached under to grab it, something small slid out, an empty condom wrapper, barely hidden. She had laughed it off. Said it was from a colleague who had bummed a ride to a pharmacy. "You know how people are," she joked. He must have dropped it. At the time, I didn't question it. But now it sat like a nail in the center of my brain. Then there was that hotel elevator photo. It had shown up in her gallery a month ago when she handed me her phone to show me a meme. I'd swiped one too far and caught a glimpse of it, her standing in an elevator mirror, dressed sharp, face angled slightly away, a glass of wine in her hand. "Oh, that's just from a work promo thing," she'd said, laughing and pulling the phone back before I could look closer. "We were doing marketing sh*TS for a conference. But we weren't in conference season. Her company didn't host anything until spring. I should have asked more questions. But I didn't. I chalked it up to my own overthinking." "Yeah?" It didn't feel like overthinking. It felt like the kind of instinct you only recognize when it's too late. I finally opened the laptop. Not to work, just to sit with the blank screen, my own reflection staring back at me in the glass. I opened a notepad file and typed. Timeline. Then I listed everything. Not in paragraphs. Just bullet points. Alarm moved from 6:30 to 6 o'clock, no change in departure time. No more shared coffee. Hidden contacts. Jamie stopped texting, radio silence. Condom wrapper in car. Elevator selfie, wine glass, hotel mirror. New perfume. Unknown lipstick on glass. Branded hotel towel. Smudge on neck, not her lipstick. Said it was dinner with colleagues. No food sent. I stared at the list for a long time. I wasn't even trying to prove anything to myself, I was trying to disprove it. But each line whispered the same thing. This isn't nothing. Madeline came into the room a few minutes later, dressed in a pale green sweater and dark jeans. She looked fresh, hair still damp from the shower, face wiped clean. No makeup yet. She walked past me and grabbed her keys. I'm heading out to grab some groceries, she said. Need anything? I looked at her. Really looked. No. I'm good. She paused. You okay? Yeah, I lied. She waited, then gave me a slight smile, the kind she used to give strangers at dinner parties, and walked out. The door shut behind her. I sat there for a moment, still staring at the screen, then copied the bullet list into a document and saved it under the most boring file name I could think of, Tax Estimates, 2020. I didn't know what I was going to do next. But I knew I needed to start remembering things on purpose. Because she had started forgetting how to lie properly. And I'd finally stopped pretending not to notice. The problem with intuition is that it's only useful if you trust it. I hadn't. Not when the lipstick showed up, not when the towel appeared, and not even when that photo nearly gave everything away. I'd given her the benefit of the doubt again and again because that's what you do when you think someone loves you back. But love shouldn't feel like questioning your own sanity in your own house. It was a Tuesday when I decided I couldn't live with half-truths anymore. She had texted me mid-afternoon, late meeting. Don't wait up, Red Heart. That used to be sweet. That day, it read like a warning. I opened her calendar through our shared email account. She wasn't careful anymore, not the way she used to be. She had deleted most of her digital trails but hadn't disabled location sharing through one of the older connected apps. It was tied to her company's logistics software, meant for scheduling pickups and route audits. She didn't know I still had access. I logged in and pinged her current location. Downtown. Grand Elysian Hotel. I stared at the screen, breath held, hands cold against the keyboard. Meeting? What kind of meeting ends at a hotel? I waited 10 minutes. Just long enough for panic to give way to something else resolve. Then I got in the car. The drive was short. Long enough for my thoughts to pile up in a mess of questions and possibilities, none of them good. What was I expecting to find? What if I was wrong? But then again, what if I wasn't? I parked across the street from the Grand Elysian and stepped out into the night air. The city buzzed around me, oblivious. I crossed the street, my eyes fixed on the revolving glass doors of the lobby. Inside, everything was as polished as I remembered, sleek marble floors, gold-tinted elevators, the faint echo of soft jazz trickling from hidden speakers. I stood in the far corner behind a row of tall planters, half-shadowed, my heart rattling in my chest like it wanted to break out. At 11:43 p.m. she entered. I'll never forget the way she moved, quick, fluid, nervous but purposeful. Her eyes flicked once toward the front desk, but she didn't stop. She walked directly toward the elevators. A man followed. He wasn't a stranger. Tall, sharp suit, the kind you don't wear unless you're trying to impress someone or you're being paid to. His hand rested easily on the small of her back like it belonged there. She didn't flinch. They stepped into the elevator together. The doors slid shut. I didn't move. I stayed frozen, like if I didn't breathe, the scene I just witnessed might dissolve, or reverse itself, or become something else, anything but what it actually was. But it didn't. I left the hotel and drove home in silence, headlights slicing through a blur of confusion and white-hot betrayal. I wasn't surprised, not really. But confirmation has a weight that suspicion doesn't. It hits differently. Like bricks instead of clouds. Back home, I poured a drink I didn't finish and opened her email on my laptop. She had cleared most of her inbox. But like most people in a rush to delete, she hadn't emptied her trash. Not completely. There it was. A deleted receipt from the Grand Elysian, timestamped that same evening. Room service. 2 glasses of champagne. Chocolate-dipped strawberries. A tiramisu, her favorite dessert. The same dessert she bought whenever we fought. Or when she knew she'd crossed a line she didn't want to talk about. I stared at the line item and thought about how she always claimed she didn't like sweets that late. Said they made her sleep badly. But this wasn't for sleeping. This was a ritual. She got home around 12:30 a.m. I was in the kitchen, pretending to scroll through my phone. She came in, heels soft on the floor, a pastry box in her hand. Hey, she said, smiling like the world hadn't just split in two. I picked up a little something for us. She placed the box on the counter, opened it slowly like it was supposed to mean something. Tiramisu. Perfectly layered. Cream still cold. I didn't say a word. She kissed my cheek and said she was going to wash up. I watched her walk away. Then I looked at the dessert again and my stomach turned. I didn't touch it. In the morning, she was already gone by the time I got up. Her coffee mug was rinsed in the sink. A note was left on the table. Meeting went long. You were asleep. Hope today's easier, heart. I folded the note and put it in the same folder as the receipt and hotel logins. That night, I sat at my desk and opened a file I hadn't touched in months. The name was simple, buried in layers of work folders hidden from plain sight. If she does it again. I had created it after the first time I'd suspected something was off, when the distance between us began to feel intentional, like she was building walls inside our home. I'd written the file late one night in a rare moment of clarity, telling myself it was just a thought exercise. Just in case. I never thought I'd actually use it. But there it was. Inside were numbered steps. Simple. Precise. Emotionless. Secure finances. Document evidence. Protect identity/passwords. Pack personal items discreetly. Leave note. Keep it short. Walk away clean. No fights. No begging. No drama. I spent that evening following my own instructions. First, I transferred my half of the savings into a private trust account I had opened months ago. It wasn't about hiding money, it was about securing it. I didn't want to split everything out of court. I wanted the truth to speak for itself. Next, I printed the hotel photos from the lobby camera archives. They weren't easy to get, but I'd made a call to a friend who did security contracts. They showed everything: her arrival, the man's hand on her back, the elevator ride, the timestamp. I placed the photos in an envelope. On a single sheet of paper, I wrote 5 words. Now I see everything. Then I sealed it. I packed a weekend bag. Nothing dramatic, just enough for space. I didn't want to slam doors or break things. I wasn't looking for revenge. What I wanted was space to feel what I hadn't let myself feel, free. That night, I left the envelope on the table, right beside the uneaten tiramisu. And then I walked out. No note in my pocket. No goodbye kiss. Just the weightless finality of someone who had already mourned a marriage long before its official death. When I left the house that night, there was no cinematic moment. No thunderstorm rolling overhead. No broken glass. No shouting match or doors slamming so hard the neighbors would whisper about it. Just the quiet echo of my footsteps down the driveway and the steady thud of my heartbeat in my ears. I had never envisioned leaving Madeline like this, silent, calculated, detached. I thought if it ever came to that, it would involve chaos. Tears. Maybe even regret. But instead, I felt clear. I didn't drive far. Just to a small rental I'd quietly signed the lease on months ago. A backup plan. At the time, it felt ridiculous, paranoid even. But somewhere deep down, I must have known this day would come. And the moment it did, I didn't hesitate. I unlocked the door, dropped my bag just inside, and sat on the couch in the dark, my hands gripping the edge of the cushion like it might keep me anchored to the floor. There was no comfort in being right. No satisfaction in confirming what I'd feared. Only the raw realization that the woman I loved, truly loved, had made a choice. Not just once. Not by accident. But over and over again. And now it was my turn to choose. The next morning, I didn't check my phone. I didn't want to read any texts or listen to her voice messages trying to explain herself. I knew they'd be there. Knew she'd wake up, see the envelope, the untouched dessert, the quiet absence of my clothes in the closet, and panic. I let her sit with that silence. Instead, I got to work. There were documents to copy, financials to update, passwords to change. I knew she'd be scrambling to understand what I knew, and how much. But I wasn't going to give her the chance to shape the narrative. I'd already watched her rewrite one too many stories. Later that afternoon, I drove to a small, independent print shop on the edge of town. I didn't want to use my home printer or even the office. Too many digital breadcrumbs. I handed the clerk a USB stick with selected files. The hotel receipt, the time-stamped lobby photo, the email deletion log, the message thread where she coordinated the hotel meeting under the name Vendor Showcase. A lie layered in corporate jargon. The man didn't ask any questions. He printed them cleanly, neatly, and handed them over in a plain white folder. I thanked him and drove away. From there, I visited the bank and closed out a joint savings account we had been meaning to move into a higher interest plan. Once things settled down. Of course, they never did. I took my half and moved it to a solo account under my name. No co-signers. No links. I felt like I was auditing the collapse of something sacred. But every action brought back a sliver of control, and that mattered more than sentiment. Next came the legal prep. I didn't file yet, but I called a lawyer I'd researched months earlier. A referral from a coworker who had been through his own messy split. I scheduled a meeting for the following week. Just knowing it was on the calendar gave me something solid to hold on to. I didn't want revenge. I wanted separation, precision, peace. By evening, I was back at the rental, eating Chinese takeout alone at a folding table. The kind of night that should have felt lonely. But it didn't. Felt quiet. Clean. She texted me 3 times that night. 11:18 p.m. Where are you? 12:05 a.m. Dan, please. We can talk. 12:41 a.m. I'm scared. Please just come home. Or call me. I don't know what's happening. No voicemails. No crying messages. Just clipped, nervous texts. Probably pacing the house in circles. Maybe she'd even checked the security cameras to see me leaving, watched the footage like it might offer a clue. I imagined her trying to figure out what I had seen, what I knew. But it didn't matter anymore. The plan was already in motion. The next morning, I mailed a second envelope. This one to her office. Inside were copies of the same documents I had left on the kitchen table, plus one more item. A **T of her location history. The same app she'd forgotten I could still access. It showed every stop she'd made in the last month. Every coffee shop rendezvous. Every late team meeting. Every lie. On the back of the last page I wrote, "You don't have to say anything. The silence says enough." After that, I changed my number. Not immediately, just after I saw the delivery had been signed for. I waited long enough to make sure she received the package. Long enough for her to see that I hadn't just walked away. I had traced the full outline of what she thought she'd kept hidden. And then I vanished from her phone. Some people fantasize about dramatic exits. Me? I preferred clean lines and locked doors. But even in my new space there were echoes. Nights when the quiet turned into something more oppressive. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., reaching instinctively for someone who wasn't there. The warmth missing beside me. The hum of her breathing replaced by the faint tick of the rental's analog clock. That first weekend apart, I drove to the edge of town where her sister lived. Not because I wanted to gossip or accuse, but because I needed to see a familiar face. Someone who had known Madeline as long as I had. Someone who had once promised to look out for her, and had once promised me she'd always be honest. Carmen answered the door in a rush. Half ponytail, slippers, confusion on her face that dissolved the moment she saw me. I didn't say anything for a while, just stood there. "I'm guessing you know," I said eventually. She didn't deny it. Her shoulders sank. "Dan, I'm sorry. I thought it was just a phase." She swore it didn't mean anything. "But you knew." A pause. "I suspected." I asked. She said it was over. I didn't want to get in the middle. That hurt more than it should have. Not just because she'd kept the secret, but because she had smiled across dinner tables, hugged me at holidays, held a camera during our anniversary toast. "You were already in the middle," I said quietly. She didn't try to defend herself after that. I left after 20 minutes. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask for an apology. I didn't want one. I just needed confirmation. The betrayal hadn't just come from Madeline. It had come from the people who said they cared, who pretended not to notice, who watched me bring her flowers and never once warned me that I was watering something already dying. That night, I wrote a list. Not of facts or evidence, but of what I wanted next. No contact for 30 days. Secure legal representation. Remove personal items from joint property. Leave final message not in anger, but in clarity. Because love, I've learned, isn't just about how someone makes you feel in their arms. It's about how safe you are when you turn your back. And Madeline never noticed that I stopped turning mine. A week passed before I heard from her again, not directly, but indirectly. Through cracks in the wall of silence I'd built. Carmen must have told her I'd come by. Or maybe Madeline just guessed. She always had a sixth sense for where guilt might find company. It started with mutuals, people who once floated casually between us, now suddenly surfacing in awkward, stilted messages. "Hey man, just checking in. How are things? Madeline mentioned you were taking space. Hope you're okay." I don't know what happened, but if you ever want to talk. Each one felt less like concern and more like reconnaissance. Like she had activated a quiet network of allies, people who knew me well enough to text, but not well enough to push back on her story. And that's what it was now, a story. Something she was shaping behind closed doors. At first, I ignored them. I didn't owe anyone explanations. But then I realized silence can be dangerous. Silence leaves room for fiction. So I started replying. Short. Controlled. Enough to set boundaries. Thanks for checking in. Just taking time for myself. Appreciate it. Things are being handled. No comment, but thanks. I could tell who was reaching out for her and who was reaching out for me. The difference was in the follow-up or the lack of one. Most of them faded off after a message or two. Except one, Greg, a friend from my side of the line. We had grown up together, lost touch during my early marriage years, but the kind of guy who still knew how to read the room. Hey, he texted one night. I don't know what's going on, but if you want eyes on anything, I've got connections. I hesitated, then typed, actually. I might. It wasn't that I needed more proof. I already had enough to crush the narrative she was likely peddling to her coworkers, to her family, to whatever therapist she was now quoting in status updates. But I wanted the full picture. I wanted to see how deep it went. How many people knew. Greg looped me in with a friend of his private sector surveillance, former IT forensic analyst. The guy's name was Nolan and he worked quiet. No drama. No trail. All he needed was access to a device. I told him about the old shared cloud account she forgot was still linked to my laptop, the one we used to sync documents when we were planning vacations or paying bills. I hadn't touched it in months. Neither had she. But she never removed it. Never thought she had to. Turns out she had started backing up her new phone to it. Photos. Audio memos. Voicemails. Some were benign, sh*ts of sunsets, restaurant menus, Zoom meeting screen*ts. Others rewrote everything I thought I understood. There was one photo in particular. Taken 2 days before I left. Madeline standing at the mirror of a hotel bathroom. Not the Grand Elysian. A different place. Smaller. Less conspicuous. She was wearing the same pale green sweater she had worn the day she said she was working from home. Same necklace. Same nail color. In the mirror, you could see a man sitting on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, shirt unbuttoned. Same man from the elevator. I clicked out of the photo and leaned back in the chair. My body didn't shake. My pulse didn't spike. I felt still. I downloaded it, filed it in the folder with the others, and kept going. Then came the audio file. A voice memo labeled 7 p.m. Thursday draft. I listened. It was her voice rehearsing what she was going to say to me. If he asks, I'll say it was a client dinner. Pause. No. Better say it was a gallery event. Something last minute. Say Carmen was there. Pause. But he might ask for pictures. Another pause. She exhaled loudly. I hate this. I hate lying. But he'll overreact. He always does. He'll make it a whole thing. He just doesn't understand that I need space. That this isn't about him. I'm not the villain. She stopped recording there. I sat in silence for a while. Not because it hurt, but because of how familiar it sounded. The rewriting. The reframing. The way she had turned betrayal into self-preservation. That memo wasn't for me. It wasn't even a confession. It was a blueprint for denial. By then, I had already scheduled a formal meeting with my lawyer. The documents were ready. The only delay was procedural. We agreed on a filing date, a method of service, and a public statement, short, controlled, only issued if necessary. But I still hadn't told my parents. I waited until Sunday afternoon to call them. I didn't want them hearing through the grapevine. My mother answered, cheerful at first. Then, as I explained, her voice cracked. Oh, Daniel. I don't even know what to say. You don't have to, I told her. Are you sure you're okay? I'm handling it. She was quiet a moment. Then, we always liked her. She was so warm. But lately, I noticed something in her tone. Like she was performing kindness. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. Yeah, I said. That sounds about right. The next day, I got the alert. Madeline had tried to log into the shared cloud account. Too late. I had already revoked access, scrubbed the sync history, and saved everything offline. Instead, she got a blank screen. I imagined her staring at her phone, wondering when I had gotten smart. Wondering how much I had seen. By Tuesday, it was clear she was starting to lose control of the story. Her work Instagram, usually filled with carefully curated posts about her career, books she was reading, elegant sh*ts of lattes and page corners, went quiet. Then 2 days later, she posted a selfie. No filter. Slightly puffy eyes. The caption read, "Life has a way of testing our strength. Some people disappear when you need them most. Others show their true colors. Trying to stay grounded. #healing, #rebuilding." I stared at it for a full minute. The comments poured in. "You've got this flexed biceps. Whatever happened, it's their loss. You're one of the strongest people I know. And of course, the worst one. You deserve someone who sees you." I closed the app. It wasn't anger I felt. It was exhaustion. Because even now, she was crafting a version of events where she was the one left behind. Where I had disappeared instead of walked away with evidence. But that was fine. Let her curate her grief. I wasn't playing chess with someone who insisted on using a Monopoly board. I texted Nolan and said, "We're good. No more pulls." He replied with a thumbs up and a single word, "respect." That night, I wrote one final message. Not to Madeline. To myself. A sort of manifesto. Something to remind me that I wasn't weak for trusting her. That forgiveness isn't failure and clarity doesn't come from rage, it comes from truth. And I had all the truth I needed now. It was her father's retirement dinner, black tie, catered, overly sentimental. I hadn't planned to go, but Madeline insisted. "For appearances," she said. "It's important to my dad." I agreed, not for her, but for closure. She smiled through speeches, toasted with champagne, and sat beside me like we were still married. Then, in front of 40 guests, she said it. Loud enough for the whole table to hear, "At least now Daniel has time to focus on himself, finally." Laughter. A few chuckles. I didn't say a word. I stood, adjusted my jacket, and walked out. The sound of my chair scraping back echoed like thunder. The door shut behind me. And just like that, I was done performing.